That was for you, Jesse. For those of you who don't know what I'm doing with that straw in this cup, uh, Jesse Waters on Fox News likes to say things that this is what men should be doing and should not be doing. Men don't drink from straws. They don't cross their legs. And they also don't make s'mores in the oven. They make them out on the campfire, stuff like that. Jesse's just a little bit insecure, I do think. Every time he sits there on the five, he's got his legs spread eagle like, yep, got to keep them wide. There's something down there. Just can't push it together. Ain't nothing there. Anyway, this is Cassandra Williamson coming to you from way up in a holler in eastern Kentucky. And so today I actually have been really busy again after the midday program. I went out, did a little bit with Walmart, the Spark, their delivery service. You know, gets me out of the house. And today I went to places I haven't seen in 50 years. Probably 45, something like that. But anyway, yeah, so I've got some videos of it, stuff like I'll post it over on YouTube at some point. But hey, you know, it's been an interesting day, hasn't it? Stock market closed the record high. It snapped back, but we'll see what Monday brings. But anyway, I'm glad it did that. My stocks went up a little, which is cool. So yeah, today's been a record day of kind of good things and bad things. So let's address the bad one first, the elephant in the room first. This morning, before sometime in the mid-morning, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, announced a new name for the USNS Harvey Milk. He wants to get rid of that name and replace it with Oscar Peterson. World War II, died in service to his ship, his nation, and his seamen who worked with him. He was a chief, petty officer in the Navy, well deserving to be honored. Very deserving to be honored and have a ship named for him, buildings, whatever he wants. Well, he can't want. He passed during the war. But absolutely need to honor him. However, the Harvey Milk, the USNS Harvey Milk, is an oiler and refueler, and it's one ship in a class of ships called the John L. Lewis class, and the lead ship is the John Lewis. And you know who John Lewis is? He was with Martin Luther King, walked across the Selma Bridge down there, the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Alabama and Selma. And, you know, part of that whole group there that marched from there to Montgomery and standing up for civil rights. So this group of ships actually acknowledges those who have devoted their lives to civil rights, not taking rights from anyone else, but making sure that those who are least protected actually are covered within the human rights and with the civil rights that are guaranteed all Americans. So many of you will say, well, we all have those things already. Why do you need to do something? Because some don't. And you say, yeah, they do. It's right there in the country. Look, you're going to be beating that one off to death with me, aren't you? I can just see it right now. I can see what you're doing. But the point is this. You know, and I know that there are people who are not treated equally or equitably with anyone else in the country simply because of, I don't know, color of their skin. Maybe they have a dialect or they're from somewhere else. Maybe they're Samoan or something like that in this country, or Polynesian. You know, one of the territories out in the Pacific that we are protectorate over. Maybe they're someone who just speaks Spanish from down in Puerto Rico. Another one of our protected territories. Maybe they're African Americans who have spent their lives trying to figure out the best way to survive and thrive in this country, having spent the better part of the last decade, the first half of it at least, dealing with things like redlining or lynchings or the destruction of their cities and towns simply because, well, you know, they become uppity black people. like Greenwood, and I think it was Greenwood in Oklahoma. The Wall Street, the Black Wall Street in the 1920s, burnt down, destroyed, people killed. They were very successful. They had built themselves a thriving town. But the white community around the outside of it, the periphery of that, couldn't stand all of that. These people, they said it was over some black person who had said something to a white woman. But that was just an excuse. We all know how that goes. That's a bullshit argument. Anyway, and then there's the LGBTQ plus people who are constantly under attack and whose rights are always being litigated or taken to the court or whatever. I mean, who among you actually wants to see your existence debated at the Supreme Court? Who wants to see your right to live and let live challenged at the United States Supreme Court because the fanatics over here on this particular nationalist, Christian nationalist side, not just Christian, there are also Muslims in that group that don't like any of these LGBT people either, but that's what's going on over there. They want us gone and have wanted it gone for a long time, folks. Wanted this whole community gone. And it's not just something that's happening today. It happened in the 50s under the Lavender Scare, where gays and lesbians were kicked out of the federal government simply because they were gay and lesbian. Okay? That's the only reason. And besides, in the 50s, they also had over in England, they'd also taken Alan Turing. You know who Alan Turing is? Who knows? Person who had solved the Enigma machine that the Germans were using to encode their messages back and forth from commanders. He broke the code. Extremely brilliant mathematician, but when they found out he was gay, none of that mattered anymore. They ran him through electroshock therapy, folks, thinking they could shock it out of him. You can't do that. It does not work. It does more harm than good. We got people in this country right now who want to do conversion therapy. And every person I've ever spoken to about that, it's a horrific experience. I haven't gone through that kind of thing. They wouldn't be able to try that with me too successfully. But anyway, so, I mean, that conversion therapy is an attempt to use the non-electrical side of electroshock therapy. They think you can make someone straighten out their sexual orientation and gender identity because, you lay hands on them and pray over them, and that's just a bunch of crap. You cannot do that. It does not work, no matter how hard you try. So anyway, today has been filled with all kinds of craziness. When Pete Hegseth this morning brought out this thing about Medal of Honor winner Oscar Peterson as the name he wants to replace the USNS Harvey Milk with, then Peterson wasn't a civil rights icon. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was. She actually is one of the names that has been put out for the ships in this series, in this class. Robert F. Kennedy Sr. was part of that. Also, he was in there. Obviously, we had John Lewis was in there and many others. So I got into this conversation over on X today. So let's just go take a look at what's going on X for a minute. I'm going to pull up one screen here and make that larger. And let's go to X. I just want to see if anybody's commented on some of the stuff that was said earlier today. I'm sure they have, because they've all wanted to go after me. Okay. I'm going to share a screen because I want to go down through here with a few things. Okay, first, let's do that. Let me share a screen. I'm going to pull up the window. I'm going to pull up that and click that. All right, here we are. See that? Let me blow it up a little bit more. I think it's already up there. No, it's not either. So I'm going to put it up about like that. So first thing in here is that VA Secretary Doug Collins said on this National PTSD Awareness Day, and I'm very much aware of my PTSD. very much. Help us spread the word about the many resources Department of Veterans Affairs offers for those affected by PTSD. I've reached out to this man a dozen times, and not more than a dozen times, and asked him to talk with these veterans, our veterans, the veterans in my community, in this community. He won't do it. I've asked people who know him to reach out to him for me. He's not responding. And I find that to be reprehensible at the very least. He needs to be talking to all of us, all the veterans. He says he is for all the veterans, but yet, if you're trans and LGB, well, forget you. He doesn't care. This administration doesn't care. This administration wants you gone, period. I don't know why that's so hard to see, but I keep an eye on it. The rest of you are going, many of you out there are going, I don't see anything like that. We don't hear anything about all of that stuff. Well, that's because you're listening to somebody who's not telling you about it. I'm telling you about it. I'm telling you what's going on in this community right now. So let's look at these 10 comments here. Let's see. People who are agreeing with what I said. And let me see why this was talking about Harvey Milk, and when Pete Hegseth announced it over on X today. Why? Harvey was a U.S. Navy veteran. This is dumb, Mr. Secretary. What was the point of doing this during Pride Month? And this is the last weekend of Pride Month. And why did he do this today? Well, there's only one reason why he did it. It's called cruelty. Cruelty, poking you in the face and saying, ha, 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 ha. See, I don't want you around. I want you gone. I'm doing it this month because I want all of you gone. Pete Hegseth is a weak-minded man who has no security in himself. He is very insecure. He may be even gay. Who knows? I'm throwing that out there, but I don't know for sure. Nobody said that. But people who go after the LGBT community just incessantly, just constantly after, I have to question their sexual orientation and gender identity. I mean, what is it about us that they take up so much real estate in their minds on us? Really? And you say, oh, that's what the Bible says. Change books. That one's wrong. I said it, okay? Change books, that one's wrong. It's not teaching you the right kind of stuff or to be compassionate or empathetic with people. But if you actually read the Beatitudes, which were the sermons on the Mount and stuff like that Jesus gave in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the first 4 books, the Beatitudes, where he was talking about all these things, who was he actually trying to surround himself with? The great stories here. He went to talk to people who were disaffected in the community. He went to talk to people who rest of society had kicked out because they didn't want them around. The religious people had kicked them out because, you can't have certain people in your synagogue, right? He went to talk to the lepers and heal lepers. He went to talk to people who were in need and crawling and actually suffering in life. He saw them and he listened to them and heard them and worked to heal them. That's what we're missing in this Christian nationalist stuff today, folks. Okay, Chris Knox. I don't know who Chris Knox is, but says, ha, no one wants to listen to your crying. Sounds to me like you may have some crocodile tears. Sounds to me like you may have some crocodile. How do you spell crocodile? Crocodile. Crocodile tears to deal with. Okay. Well, anyway, so that's what I do, folks. I get over here on X and different platforms, and I actually try to stir up the pot and get people to come in and watch. Hi, let me go over here and just say this one real quick. I'm going to go say something right here. I'm live again. Who's coming to see? who's stopping by. Oh my goodness. It was disgraced. This one I've heard so many times. I actually responded to this guy, Johnson, or Nathan Johnson. He was disgraced in uniform, talking about Harvey Milk. No, there are no records anywhere. No court records, no grand jury indictments or investigations, no police records, nothing at all to tag this man as a pedophile. None. It's not out there. Why is that? He wasn't well off or well to do. He was an officer in the Navy, though, but got kicked out because he was gay. But Pete wants to change the name off this ship. The man, Harvey Milk, became a civil rights or a gay icon in San Francisco, was on the board of supervisors before he was assassinated. He and the mayor were assassinated simply because they were talking about all this stuff with gay people and lesbians and things like that. That's the kind of crap we have to deal with, folks. And I will say, here in Eastern Kentucky, I've been up on the mountain today. I don't know if any of you know where Callaway Branch is, but Callaway Branch goes from Blackberry, Kentucky over to Phelps, Kentucky. And up on the top of that hill, it is beautiful. It's God's country, but all of it is. The entire world is, if you believe that. More than welcome to that. All right. So let's stop sharing this thing. There's really not much more that can be said about that one. Stop sharing. Stop. Okay. So thank you for watching, participating in this today. We do have some Supreme Court decisions that I do want to talk about. Sorry. First one I want to talk about would be the Maryland parents who didn't want their kids to be introduced to anything like LGBT characters in books or anything like that. They wanted to be able to exempt their children from those things. While I don't agree with what they are doing, that is a parent's right to decide for their family and their kids how they should be presented with information that may be contrary to what the family wants. And the reason I say that, we can't be hypocritical about this. We're demanding that parents, here we are on one side, we're demanding that parents and doctors and their therapists and the kids and the children have control of and ensure the safety and future of their children who are trans. That's a parent decision between the parent, the child, the doctor, the therapist. We want that, right? So we have no business. If you want to be a hypocrite, this is how you do it. Then you become a hypocrite whenever you say, oh, it's such a travesty that the parents don't want to have their kids participate in classes that have to do with LGBT kids or gender or sexuality or things like that, sexual orientation. No, the parents have that right. If you extend it to one thing because of what you think and believe is true for trans kids and trans youth, and you're maintaining that the parent and the doctor and therapist are the ones who have final say on that and not the government, like independent thinking, libertarian thinking kind of thing, live and let live kind of thing. Well, you have to be able to continue with that rationale and have that same logic apply to this case with the Maryland parents. You can't say this is not true, but that has to be true, or we got to do it right here, but you can't do it there. No, you're hypocrites if you do that. I'm talking to my community. You're hypocrites if you're the ones going around saying those two things. They're diametrically opposed. You have to be consistent in your thinking. You have to be consistent in how you come across and talk about issues. And that's one of the biggest problems, left and right, for that matter. So that was the one case, and I happen to agree with the court's decision on that one. The parents have the right to protect their kids as they see best. Just as parents, doctors, and therapists parents who have transgender youth have that same right. that case, the Maryland case, can be used as precedent to support care for transgender youth. Question is, will the court be hypocritical on this and decide a different way, depending on who you are? I suspect that that's exactly what's going to happen. The courts, sorry, the court's already shown this to be the way they think. Excuse me. And so on some topics, they say that these rights here are protected for parents because they don't want their kids introduced to anything to do with gender identity or sexual orientation. But on the other hand, parents who have transgender youth, though, they can't. We're going to regulate that. We're going to tell them they can't do that. That's the hypocrisy. So with this case, with the Maryland family, you now have precedent set to establish that the same non-hypocritical way of processing this information should apply to parents with trans youth. Or the court should have said, no, the parents cannot exempt their kids from those kind of books and readings and things like that. And then they would have a leg to stand on if and when they decide to say parents with trans youth can't give them the medical care that the doctors are saying they need. See what I'm saying? Is that clear as mud? There has to be some consistency. You can't have hypocrisy from us or from the courts or from the right. You've got to apply these rules and these laws consistently for everyone. The Constitution should be applied equally to everyone. And if it were an ideal Pollyannish world, we wouldn't have to have things that like the Civil Rights Act. If the Constitution were applied uniformly, equally to everyone in the country, then the Civil Rights Act wouldn't be needed. But we know from experience that it does. Yep. We do, don't we? Even after they were freed, they were still attacked and beset upon. The Supreme Court actually started ruling in favor of the previous slave owners because there were racists on the Supreme Court who actually made it clear that they thought that the black man was inferior to the white man. Yeah, on the Supreme Court. So anyway, we have that case. And then, what was the other case? Let me pull up something here. I need to drop one screen down and bring up another one. Another issue I thought was pertinent. We did talk about Harvey Milk. Okay. I talked about that too. I got the two main cases out of the way that I wanted to talk about. The main thing that I wanted to talk about anyway was Pete Hegseth, and then this Supreme Court sides with religious parents seeking to opt out of LGBT storybooks, and that's in the Washington Post, by the way. That story is there. So we'll find out if they are hypocrites or not, if the Constitution is equally applied across the board. Because if it is, any decision on the health care of trans youth and the parents' right to make those decisions should match the same rationale and logic of this case. There should be no difference. So, what do you think? There were other cases that went to the Supreme Court today. Let me get rid of a few things here. And they're all important. And I'll take some time this weekend to go through a lot of these things and look at it again and review it. Oh my gosh. But just to give you a recap on the afternoon, well, I left here and went on top of the mountain. I'd actually created a little video clip from on top of Callaway Mountain, which is between Blackberry, Kentucky and Phelps, Kentucky. And I drove over that mountain. It's beautiful and gorgeous up on the mountain with all the green, very narrow road. It's not a 2-lane road. It's a narrow paved road going across the top of that mountain, and it's gorgeous up there. But you know what? I've said all this all along, and I'll say it again. I had to talk to a lot of people because there are no signals over there, no cell phone service. Essentially, with my phone anyway, it's AT&T, but my iPhone it didn't quite work over there, and I'm out taking stuff to people in different places and getting to know them and talk with them. So I'm way up in this holler, and I had to stop and ask somebody. I said, "Hey, I'm trying to find this straight road. It's called Straight Road or Straight Holler around here, holler, Straight Holler, right here in this area somewhere." And we chatted. The person I spoke to, we were talking about two jets passing each other in the snow and stuff like that. And the lady up the road that I spoke to first, she said, "The guy down there might have some answers to tell you where all these are, because I'm not from around here. And by the way, you look good." And I'm going, "Well, thank you." So, look, I know people can see. I know they can interpret things and understand exactly who I am. They see me day in and day out all across this area. And not once do I have someone come up to me and say something like, "Oh, you're just some one of those." No, I don't get that. What I get is, "Hey, how you doing? Haven't seen you in a while." And carry on a conversation with some old people, with some older people, and with some younger people. And I'm talking about from Blackberry, Kentucky, over into Phelps, Kentucky, and from what is it? Not McVeigh, but McAndrews, Kentucky, and Pinson Fork, and all that area right through there, right into Belfry area and Hardy area, from Ransom, Kentucky, and all those places. That whole region. I interact with people all the time. I don't interact in fear. I walk up. Why should I? I know who I am. Do you know who you are? I don't need to have someone validate me. I don't need you to use pronouns that you think I might want and walk on eggshells around me. I am not bothered by any of that. Not at all. It's on you. I mean, if Robert, let's just use this one as an example. Let's say that Elizabeth, Elizabeth comes up to you after you've been talking for a while and you call her Elizabeth, and she goes, "Hey, would you mind not calling me Elizabeth, because that was my mom's name, and I just want to respect that, and mom is such a good person and all, and and I just want to respect that. Would you mind just calling me Liz?" And you look at her and you go, "Nope, I can't do that because that wasn't your birth name." Or conversely, Robert, you meet him at the local VA. You get to know him. He introduces himself to you as Bob, but you call him Robert. And he goes, "Would you mind calling me just Bob? Because, my dad was such an awesome person. He served in World War II. And, all I did was went to Vietnam." He was one of the greatest generation. I just happened to go to Vietnam and come back home and get spit on. Well, and you look at him and you go, "I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Your birth name was Robert. I have to call you Robert." Do you know how stupid that would make you look, and how infantile that makes you look? But the thing is, Bob doesn't chastise you for it. Bob decides that, well, it's on you. You're the one being an ass. It's not on him. It's on you, because you're the one who did that. It's like all the people over on X who like to say, "Hey, dude," talking to me, "Hey, dude," or "sir," or all kinds of stuff like that. And I just laugh it off for the most part, except for sometimes whenever they're just being jerks. And then I call them out. But they're all being jerks. They're doing it deliberately. But that's not the point. The point is, I don't have control over them, and they should not have control over me either. Live and let live. That's where we need to be. And with this weekend coming up right now, this is the last weekend of Pride Month, and also PTSD awareness, as Secretary Collins said. As the last weekend of Pride Month. Oh, and there was one. Oh, I got to tell you this. There was a festival taking place up in Idaho. somebody put this thing on. They were calling it the Hetero Awesome Vest. Well, this musician got himself invited to it with his band, and he told him, look, I'm a veteran and all this kind of stuff. And he was an Army Ranger. So he goes up there, and the Hetero Awesome Fest is all about honoring the traditional family. The 99%. That doesn't apply for the other 1%. But it's the Hetero Awesome Fest. And this story is from NBC News. And I happen to know this person who wrote it, Joe Yerkaba. Sorry, Joe. But it's a good story. But this musician happens to be LGBTQ. And he gets up on stage. He starts to sing and all this kind of stuff. And he had his Army jacket on, his Ranger jacket on, and had his little beret on, all that kind of stuff. He had the Army Ranger uniform down there, just the top, not the pants or anything like that. And then he starts taking it all off. Underneath, he's got a shirt on that has an upside down U.S. flag on one sleeve and a trans or an LGBT heart on the other. And he starts singing a song about a transgender boy, and how his family had been mean to him and all this kind of stuff. And he was going through this song, and it went viral. This person's name, by the way, was Daniel Hamrick, a Boise-based musician who performs at Renaissance festivals with his band, Buzz Bomb 711. I like that name. Said his goal, I'm reading from this article that was written by Joe for the NBC News. Let me see. I believe that anyone who's out has a responsibility to be gay and loud for the people who have to be gay and quiet. There's some truth to that. You don't have to be gay and obnoxious. And certainly, and somebody mentioned this over on X earlier today, they said there's so much fetishism going on with all this pride stuff. And it's not, and I've said, well, it's not all pride things. For one thing, I happen to agree with you on that. There's too much lewd and lascivious fetish type stuff at pride parades where children can see it. And I happen to disagree with that. I've been to some of these pride parades, and I know what I'm talking about. When you see a gay person or a trans person or a non-binary person, somebody standing up on the top of a truck or a flatbed or whatever on their float, and all they got on is a leather thong, and they're gyrating around in front of the kids who are on either side of the road. And that, it's just revolting to me. So we need to police our own community too. We've got to stop some things that actually revolt, that just make all of us feel sick. But it also gets labeled as something that we all are, when that is not the case, folks. So anyway, I've talked long enough. I've bored you to death. Let me see a point down here in the bottom. I see some chat. Probably somebody. Same here. Most people are friendly to me, and I in kind is kind back. Good. Joni, good to see you. I hope you have a great weekend. Everyone who has been watching, thank you so much. Go onto the website, and let me get the caption up here on there. You can go to the website. It's www.cassandra, CASSANDRA-LLC.com. Go there. Sign up so you can get the newsletters if you're not getting them already. I send out frequent updates, just so you know, typically every day or so, sometimes more than once a day, depending on the breaking news or what it is that comes up I feel like needs to be discussed. And then also let your friends know, come back Monday through Friday, 1-ish p.m. Eastern time. And I say ish because it's variable. I do have to take care of my family here and their schedules and doctor's appointments and me going out to get things for them and making sure they're all right. Does take up some of that, and that's fine. That's why I'm here back here in Eastern Kentucky. I'm here for them as a caregiver for them. And then so also at 6 p.m. Now I am looking at finding another time other than 6 p.m., but up to you, whatever y'all think is appropriate on that one. I'm trying to find the best time to reach the most people. And I think consistency is probably the large part of it. The whole goal is there's nothing black and white about me. I've always been the person who is kind of more in the middle of a whole lot of things, but I do believe this, and I'll leave you with this, that the way to a sustainable future where all of us get something that actually moves us in the right direction towards better lives for all Americans, we're going to have to start reaching out to people who are not in the same silo as we are. We need some of that adversarial collaboration that Penn State does. And it's also, now I think originally the Rand Corporation developed this thing called the Delphi method back in the 50s. It's a lot of that too. But anyway, have a great evening.